The Lone Ranger sold his wardrobe. The Lone Ranger sold his bad dog. Well, you saw him, and you can't hardly know, 'cause times change, I know.
On some days, he's more than humble. On some days, he's cold and mad, mad as hell. Well, you saw him, and you can't hardly know. It's so strange. Well, I know. Those lakes of golden water, those lakes of gold are all running out. Well, you saw him, and you can't hardly know. It's so strange. Well, I know. Joy, joy, joy. Work, work, work harder. Sure as the hours. Joy, joy, joy. Work, work, work harder. You say. On some days, he's more than humble. On some days, he's cold and mad, mad as hell. Well, you saw him, and you can't hardly know. It's so strange. Well, I know. Those lakes of golden water, those lakes of gold are all running out. Well, you saw him, and you can't hardly know. It's so strange. Well, I know. Joy, joy, joy. Work, work, work harder. Sure as the hours. Joy, joy, joy. Work, work, work harder. You say. Joy, 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 work, work, work harder, sure as the hours. Joy, 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 work, work, work harder, you say.
Come along, join the fun, in a world where adventure is never done. Every corner we turn, a new friend in tow. It's time to start the magic on the Globus Show. It's time to learn and grow on the Globus Show. See the sights, so much to know. Across the land, together we go. Hand in hand, we join the flow. Discover wonders in the Globus Show, where every day's a brand new episode. start the magic on the Globus Show. It's time to learn and grow on the Globus Show. See the sights, so much to know across the land. Together we go, hand in hand we join the flow. Discover wonders in the Globus Show, where every day's a brand new episode on the Globus Show. It's time to learn and grow on the Globus Show.
What up? Sorry I'm a little late. I laid back down to cuddle with my wife, and it was 8:30. Good. What up, Twitch? What up, Pharaoh? What up, bots? What up, lurkers? What up, tiny people in my chatterino? It's your boy. Oh. Alright, I put up the schedule for the stream as it currently exists. So today is August 24th, if I believe correctly, yes. And then we're going to do 2 evening streams next week, one on Wednesday, one on Thursday. Then I'm pretty sure I'm going to be doing a stream on Saturday morning. Got to nail that down. So that's schedule. It is up. It's scheduled. There's a schedule. Slept in for the first time in a while. Woke 2 hours ago, which is 12 p.m. here. I mean, sometimes a little sleeping in isn't a bad thing, right? Get a little rest. As long as it doesn't throw off your schedule being an adult. All right. Let us start with some candy. Cartoon from Toadburger from 2 years ago.
Did I float?
Go on and get him, boy. I got my eye on you.
I have located the pilot.
We gotta get that pilot or the secret documents or whatever. It is of the utmost proprietary.
I believe the word is priority, and I've already stated that I've located the pilot.
Now don't you sass me, boy. I take this very serious, boy.
here to rescue you. Hello, my name is Blimbo. On the search, please do not take that. Under Article 4 of the Antarctic Treaty,
Your name is Maggie.
Who are you talking to, boy?
nobody. Also, he drowned. His helmet drowned him.
Oh, that's a terrible shame. Now pull what you can out of that piece of crap, because I ain't going back empty-handed and grab the flight recorder data from the main computer.
Flight recorder data?
It should have a record of the crash, the cockpit video, etc. and so forth.
May I access the flight recorder? Pilot identified. Yes, my name is... Okay.
I'm sorry to bother. Do you know how to delay a software update?
I can take a look at it. Where is your phone? Pain.
The ship's gone.
I noticed. Prepare the washer for my britches, boy.
Yes, sir.
Oh, my pretty boy, huh? What is that thing?
What up, Cosmic?
It's an extra monitor I found on the ship.
I don't give a shit. What do you say?
It was neat. It was somewhat reminiscent of the original Heavy Metal cartoon. Just a little more like... Just a little more simple, right? The scanning of the chips was kind of cool. Dialogue was, you know, it wasn't great, but I do not regret having watched it. That's what I can say. What up, Cosmic? Stampy is good. I don't know where Stampy is. Probably cuddling in bed with my wife, like I was. Up next, how a ship works. What up, old lobster? It's just like that. That's true facts. And finally, to round out the morning candy, adventures in state space.
This is a random agent exploring the state space of a sliding block puzzle. The puzzle is called Klotsky. These block puzzles are quite common, but aside from just being puzzles, these sliding blocks define graphs, modeling convoluted topologies with their local substructure, as well as their global superstructure. Often, it's a 6x6 grid where the solution is to free this block from the hole on the right. We can't do that yet, since this piece is in the way. Let's represent the current position of the puzzle as a node. If we make one move on the puzzle, we arrive at a different node. Since these positions are just one move apart, we draw an edge connecting the two nodes. Each node is connected to a few more, forming a labyrinth of paths. You might start to wonder, if we add all the nodes, what would the graph look like? Maybe it has an overarching structure, such as a grid. Or maybe it's a total mess. To build some intuition, here's a few contrived puzzles first. With just one block, there's only one degree of freedom. With two, you get the Cartesian product of their coordinates, yielding a grid. Each block defines a different axis of motion. 3 blocks make a 3D lattice. And with 4 degrees of freedom, the graph naturally extends to a hypercube. But it gets more fun when the pieces can intersect. Taking our 2-block puzzle, but with blocks opposing each other, a section of the 2D structure is no longer valid, representing overlapping pieces. With the 2 blocks on the same lane, we get this triangle shape. Wherever the top block is, that serves as a bound for the bottom block. With a puzzle like this, we implicitly create an imaginary counterpart structure, corresponding to the valid states which are unreachable without one block passing through the other. 3 intersecting pieces still form a cube, there's just some excavated areas. But as the piece number gets higher, the graph's dimensionality has less to do with the number of pieces and more to do with the number of empty spaces. As an example, this puzzle has some cool behavior. If I expand it out entirely, notice that it has some overall superstructure, but also, in a small portion of the graph, the local behavior is quite nicely patterned as well. It's like a cute little local Euclidean manifold with 2 dimensions, 2 degrees of freedom. That's because on the puzzle, there are 2 holes allowing movement. One axis characterized by moving the top hole, one axis for the bottom. In the extreme case, it's not the pieces moving, but rather the empty spaces which define the degrees of freedom. So, somewhere between a full board and an empty one, we get complex structures of tangled intersections between pieces. Here's one of the puzzles we started with. Its superstructure is quite simple. Pause for a moment to think through what it might look like. You might be able to guess its form from the arrangement of the pieces. Ready? From this perspective, the puzzle is almost symmetrical. The key is recognizing that these 2 pieces stay latched in one of 2 spots. They can either be to the left of the vertical red bar, or they can be to the right of it. Only one can transition at a time. When the red bar is up, the orange block can transition. But when it's down, the green block can transition. This is the defining characteristic of the graph's superstructure. It's a square connecting 4 corners. We can color the nodes on the graph in correspondence with the position of the puzzle. Nodes in this half have the green block right of the bar, and nodes in this half have the orange block right of the bar. Let's take a tour around this graph. Now, from here, we can highlight all the solutions where the green block is by the hole. Unsurprisingly, they all live in the corners with the green block right of the bar. Can you figure out why the graph has a higher dimensionality near the corners? Here's Klotsky again. The goal is to get this big piece out of the bottom. It's slightly different since the intersections don't have pins, so blocks are free to move laterally. Compared to the last puzzle, it's much harder. I showed it to a coworker after work, but he wouldn't leave until he solved it. He finally got it. At 11 p.m. He thought the hardest part was getting the box under the horizontal bar. Instead of solving it myself, I was more interested to see how it works under the hood. Is getting the box under the bar actually the hardest part? The structure defined by this puzzle. What is its form?
That's fucking cool.
That's 25,955 nodes. The puzzle is symmetrical, so the graph is too. For example, if we take this position, the board is a mirror reflection of this node on the opposite side. Turning 90 degrees, we see a rough division into two halves. This red node right here is the starting position. And these are all the solutions, where the square is at the bottom. All the solution nodes are on the opposite half of the graph as the starting position. By making random moves, unless we get lucky, we're probably going to crash into this dense pit. Going back to the start, the only alternative is to walk one of these very fine lines to the other side.
Stanby showed up, so we're taking a break from this esoteric coolness to feed the co-host. Stampy Snacks. What up, Beef? We got them Stampy Snacks. He's snacking to the max. And his name's Stampy. What up, Walking Stick? I want to see you, though. Show me your face. What up, Chef? All right. Back to the esoteric.
This line is the shortest path to a solution. Let's follow it. Interestingly, this is not the path used by the Guinness World Records speed solver, who instead takes this line. Let's see if my friend was right that getting the horizontal bar unstuck is the hardest challenge. Let's highlight every node. Red when the block is above the bar, orange when they're side by side, yellow when the block is almost under, and green when the block is finally below the bar. Now, once again, take a peek at the solution set. There's an extremely close overlap. So my friend's intuition was right. What else can we learn? Remember how this puzzle has unreachable positions? So does Klotsky. You might notice that although the graph is horizontally symmetrical, why not vertically too? Although in theory you could rearrange all the pieces upside down, it's not actually possible, unless you take a piece out and put it back in. Adding the flipped board and all the other positions reachable, we get our doubly symmetric graph. Are there any other disconnected islands? It turns out quite a lot. Here's the biggest one, with only 248 nodes. It's primarily oriented as a long path with occasional branching. So what makes this puzzle hard? We could say, for example, that it's hard because getting the block under the bar is hard. Or that it's hard because crossing between the two halves is hard. But I think there's something more fundamental going on here. Let's peek at a faraway land, and select a small region of nodes. Now, I'm going to show you the boards for all of these nodes, but blurred together so that we can only see the shared patterns. All the boards in this substructure have one thing in common. The block and bar are in the center. This local structure is formed by two holes, similar to the 2D grid before. But if we align the holes just right, we can break out into a different substructure with its own rules and organization. In other words, this graph can be thought of not as a single unified topology, a single overarching framework of rules which govern the puzzle as a whole, but rather a collection of local sub-puzzles, which have their own logic and form, loosely stitched together into one large puzzle. But what's the point? Who even cares? It's just some toy. Allow me to draw a parallel, diagramming a map of phenomena in the natural world. We see biological superstructures at the highest level, built loftily atop a physical substructure through several layers of abstraction. The point is, the differentiation of resolutions of phenomena isn't unique to physics. Even the most mundane domestic toy is no exception. Rather, such form emerges from the mere computational exploration of a system of rules. I love using computer science to shine a fresh light on systems we otherwise wouldn't think twice about. Complicated topics, slidey puzzles and programming alike, when viewed from the right perspective, can become much more clear. That's why Brilliant's lessons are so effective. Their games and clear examples make all those hard subjects infinitely more digestible.
All right, go for your commercial,
Learn to
homie,
think like a
because
programmer
that
by
was
breaking down
that
complex
was
problems into
just a
manageable
really
chunks
cool
of code.
experience.
Or dive right into Python and start building programs on day one. Brilliant helps you get
What was
smarter
the
every day
abstract
with
of this
thousands of
video to
interactive lessons in
start?
math, science,
It was
programming,
talking
data
about
analysis, and AI.
those little
These topics
slidey
don't have
block
to be intimidating.
puzzles,
Uncover their mystery with Brilliant. To try everything
and
Brilliant
just
has to offer
how many
for free
different
for 30 days and get 20%
states
off
there
an annual
are and how
subscription,
many
visit
nodes in
brilliant.org/2swap
relation to each
in the
other,
description,
with each
or scan the
node
QR code on
representing a
screen.
different state
This has been
of
2swap,
the
with music by 6884.
the board state at any given point in time. It's fucking cool. Top comment. Why is the quality so damn high? My inferior eyes were not meant for this. No, not talking about superposition. Like, just that you could draw out a complete graph of a system, and holy shit, dude. Like, for like the intersection between game theory and systems thinking that happened in this video, homie earned you know, a like, a subscribe, a bell to stay notified, all the way with that. That was first rate. Cool. Japan's father of humanoids on robots. Basically mapping out the nodes of the movement of all the blocks at any point of finding a solution. And like, yes, and if you look at it in the context of like other types of systems, you know, like if you're thinking logistically, right? Like the whole point is to transport this thing from point A to point Z, and all the different states it could be in between point A and point Z. And then, you know, you can find the most efficient route, the fastest route, all those other kind of systems thinking questions from a logistical point of view. It's neat. Fucking, there's a lot at 9:30 in the morning on a Sunday. I did not expect it to go that hard.
I'm an android designed to resemble a real person.
Hiroshi Ishiguro, often called the father of humanoids, has dedicated his life to making the most realistic and human-like robots in the belief that the lines dividing these machines and humans will someday completely disappear.
We want to use a humanoid robot in daily situations. But for other countries, in the United States and European countries, probably they want to use the robot in the factories. So in Japan, we want to use in both the factories and daily life. I was in China. I have seen so many humanoid robots there. But the problem is applications. But I guess within 5, at least 10 years, I think we're going to develop the killer application for the humanoid robots, and people will start to use the humanoid robots in daily life, in factories.
When comparing Japan's progress in robot adoption, Ishiguro says the main issue is practicality, something he sees recent leaps in AI resolving.
I think Japanese people are quickly adapting, to the humanoid robots. So that is the Japanese cultures. We never distinguish human and robots. I think we are doing it differently. Actually, 25 years ago,
yeah, bus route, train routes, all those are like just anything where you have to get something from point A to point B. You can visualize it in that way that they did. And that's fucking cool. Because is it art? Because it was pretty as shit too. Like some of those friggin' those graphs, especially the last one, the big one that had that really alien shape to it. It's fucking awesome.
In Japan, humanoid robot development was very active, right? But we couldn't find the real applications. But once we could find the real applications, of course, we want to start to use the humanoid robot in a daily life, right? So another bottleneck is AI, right? So in order to develop a better AI, the AI is a very, very fundamental technology for the robot, therefore making it more human-like. But of course, the people worry about the autonomy of AI. But I believe, we are not so stupid.
At the Osaka World Expo, Ishiguro's vision is on display, showcasing a futuristic Japanese society in 50 years where humans and robots coexist.
We can deeply study about the human itself. It's better to give the human-like appearance to the robot so people can naturally talk with the robot, right? So you can have a chat with my robot, right? So, and probably, you can have some feeling to talk with me. And another the merit is we can deeply study about the humanity itself. So the human is animal that have two ways of the evolutions. One is the genes, the other is the technologies. That is the difference from the other animals. So technology is a way of the human evolutions. So by developing the technologies, we can have evolutions, right? So by accepting a robot technology, AI technologies, we can be more advanced humans. And by accepting AI and robots, we can be more better humans.
Sherry-Ann, Bloomberg, Tokyo.
Fuck your flanker fucking bullshit. My man's got it right there. Here's a new robot.
Under the impetus of the wave of technology, artificial intelligence is reshaping our world at an unprecedented speed. From industrial production experiences to thoughtful social services, from the healthcare frontlines that protect our health to smart and efficient urban management, artificial intelligence is everywhere, guiding the direction of future development.
What up, Monochromatic?
To cultivate more talents that meet the needs of society, we have carefully developed the DLAI 535. Artificial Intelligence Integrated Innovation Application Platform. This is not just an...
We saw one the other day. Helix was folding towels. It wasn't doing a great job, but, you know, it was doing it.
Artificial intelligence device is also a key that opens the door to the future. It integrates 5 major application scenarios, from challenging intelligence through puzzle board games to precise recognition, use universal identification technology.
Detected 1 gas can. Detected 1 electric bike.
From ensuring safety through aviator safety monitor and control, to enjoying the convenience of smart home living, then to the efficient operation of intelligent sorting. It showcases the charm of artificial intelligence from all angles. Behind of this is the strong support of 3 color technologies. Visual inspection technology gives machines the ability to see. Natural language processing technology helps machine understand human language. Dongliang classmate.
How can I help you?
Turn on the blue LED.
Okay, the blue indicator light is on.
Large model application technology.
Empowering machines with deep learning and intelligent decision-making capabilities.
I just love that. That was fun. That looks neat. That looks neat. Oh. Let's see what Meta has. Meta introducing Dino V3. Self-supervised learning for vision at unprecedented scale.
MetaFair presents Dino V3.
Sorry. RIP to headphone wearers. I am sorry.
Self-supervised learning for vision at unprecedented scale. Dino V3 scales self-supervised learning for images to produce our strongest universal vision backbones. Rich, dense image features show impressive self-similarities with exceptional consistency in time. Dense features are aligned across objects and even across dramatic style changes. Building on these features takes just a few manual annotations, enabling applications like zero-shot segmentation tracking or building a few-shot fine-grained segmentation model. These features power exceptional performance across a broad range of vision tasks. Researchers and developers use Dino in breakthrough applications. And with Dino V3, we release a specialized backbone for satellite imagery tasks. This open-source release includes our training code and model weights, efficient models and alternative architectures, tutorials to get you started. Learn more about Dino V3.
Well, that's neat. All right. So a while back, we talked about the latest near-Earth object, 3i Atlas. And then I saw this.
What if an interstellar object whirling through our solar system is actually a nuclear-powered spacecraft sent by aliens to test how humans respond? That's what a noted astrophysicist believes might be the case. And he says an image from the Hubble telescope backs him up. Most scientists agree that the so-called 3I Atlas is a comet from another solar system. But Harvard scientist Avi Loeb claimed on this show a couple of weeks ago that it could actually be some type of alien technology. Now, that's a controversial opinion all on its own. But he's now going a step further, arguing that the 3I Atlas could be a nuclear-powered alien spacecraft. Loeb says the Hubble picture appears to show the object emitting its own light. The object also appears to lack something that all comets have in common, and that's a tail. So what is this thing exactly? Well, joining us now is Avi Loeb. He's the head of the Galileo Project, director of Harvard University's Institute for Theory and Computation. He's also the best-selling author of the book Extraterrestrial. Great to have you back on the show. So you now say this is not only an alien spaceship, but it's nuclear-powered? Why are you saying that?
Well, thanks for having me. First, I should say that if the light that we observe from this object is reflection of sunlight, its size needs to be bigger than Manhattan Island, 20 kilometers or so. And there isn't enough rocky material in interstellar space to deliver a rock of that size earlier than 10,000 years from now. So the question is, what is it? And its orbit, the trajectory that it takes, is aligned with the plane of the planets around the sun to within 5 degrees. That's a chance of 1 in 500. And moreover, the timing.
What does that tell you? What does that trajectory tell you?
Well, it indicates that perhaps it was designed by some intelligence.
That's something steering it.
Not necessarily, but the trajectory itself was chosen to be such that this object will pass close to Mars, Venus, and Jupiter. The chance of that happening, the timing of its arrival is perfect for that, with a likelihood of 1 in 20,000. And so I'm just saying we should observe it. It doesn't look like it's a random occurrence. The size, the trajectory, the fact that it comes so close to 3 planets in our solar system, and actually it comes closest to the sun on October 29th, when the Earth would be on the other side of the sun. We won't be able to observe it. I'm analyzing right now the best image we have of it. We don't have any evidence for gas around it in the spectrum that was taken, but we do see some fuzz, some halo of scattered light around it in front of it.
We're looking at the image now. What does that tell you, that halo of light around it?
Right. So usually for comets, you see a cometary tail trailing the objects from behind because it's being pushed by the radiation from the sun. The dust particles are pushed to be behind, to lag behind the object. In this case, what we are seeing is a glow in front of the object. And I'm analyzing first if this is caused by dust. The amount of dust is very little. Over 6 months, the amount of dust that will be ablated from the object to generate this glow is just less than a millimeter thick. So it could be just dirt on a solid surface of such an object. And the question is, what is the nature of this object? Of course, as it gets closer to the sun, we would get a better view of it. And we could use spacecraft like Juno next to Jupiter. I spoke about it with Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna. She called me on the phone and I gave her an update about the object, and she encouraged in a formal letter she wrote to the head of NASA, Sean Duffy, the Secretary of Transportation, to encouraging NASA to use Juno, which is next to Jupiter, to come close to 3I Atlas when it will get there on March 16th, 2026.
So Juno could gather some data, take some pictures of this thing?
Yes, but also a camera that is next to Mars, because this object will come very close to Mars as well on October 3rd, 2025, and it will be within a distance of 29 million kilometers from Mars. And there is a 0.5 meter camera that is currently used to watch Mars itself, but I encourage the team that operates it to look at 3I Atlas, and they can get a pixel resolution of 30 kilometers around this object, so we can get a better sense of what the nucleus of this object is.
And super quick, Avi, is there any reason to be concerned about this?
Yeah, you never know what kind of intent it has, and I think we should, in the future, have some international organization that decides how to respond to a visitor to our backyard, because that visitor may enter through the front door.
Avi Loeb, fascinating.
Thank you for watching.
Jesus. Yeah. I'm not saying it's not aliens. I'm just saying that you got to present me with a whole bunch of evidence that it's aliens. You know what I mean? I could try describing the thing, but I'm going to let my man over at Cool Worlds take care of it.
Well, the time has finally come. I tried to resist it, but today I am talking about the third interstellar object to be detected passing through our solar system, 3I Atlas, and whether...
Yeah, 100%, Farrah. We should absolutely be looking at it, measuring it, observing it, doing all the things. Let's do science. Let's do science like a motherfucker.
It is an alien spaceship. First off, the reason I didn't want to make this video is that the topic is inexorably intertwined with Professor Avi Loeb, and in general, I don't like making content about people. I prefer talking about the universe. And yes, I know, logically I shouldn't feel this way because clicks and social media revel in tearing down others. It's all about drama. Character assassination wins views, and YouTube demonstrates that even in scientific discourse. But you know what I'm going to say might not be fashionable, and I think this story and indeed Avi are more complex than a simple good versus bad dichotomy that social media often prefers to deal in. Right off the bat, I want to say that Avi Loeb is a colleague and someone who I have had numerous productive scientific conversations with, someone who has had an enormous impact in the fields of astrophysics and cosmology. Let's just forget all of the titles and awards that he's amassed. Just look at scientific output. The guy has published over 700 peer-reviewed articles over the last 40 years.
That's
he
a
is,
lot.
by any measure, one of the most productive astrophysicists to have ever lived. And it's not just sheer quantity. He has published numerous seminal works, such as developing models as to how the first quasars formed and the process of reionization in the early universe. One cannot trivially dismiss the man as some kind of loon, and yet, at the same time, what he has been writing about this object 3I Atlas, and indeed other objects before this, has generated widespread condemnation from astronomers. Professor Chris Lintott of Oxford University calls his ideas nonsense on stilts and an insult to the exciting work going on to understand this object. And as I alluded to, this isn't the first time that Loeb has injected aliens to explain anomalies. Dr. Steve Desch has said that Avi's earlier alien claims are conflating the good science we do with ridiculous sensationalism. That is strong language, and I can't count how many colleagues in private conversation have mocked his recent behavior. It's almost become a running gag in the community at this point. But I know that many of you just don't care about what famous astronomer X or Y says about Loeb. What you really care about is whether this idea could be plausible. Could this actually be true? So today we are going to go through these arguments, but we are...
Yeah, I'm in that camp. I don't even care if it's a low probability. Is it plausible at all? Is it possible? Like, the first thought when Avi in the previous video was talking about there was a bright light from the object, right? What I would expect to see, if you've seen The Expanse, you know the type of deceleration that you would be looking for, under those conditions. You're traveling, the object is traveling this way, and it's projecting energy that way to move it forward. So it would need to do a complete 180 along the same course and then project an equal amount of energy to slow it down. If I saw something like that, that would be like, holy shit, right? Like, And if that's what that flash of energy was, the beginning of that kind of thing, that but like, is it plausible? Do I think it's aliens? Probably not. It is a very low probability of being aliens, but fuck, I mean, I'll take it at this point if it is aliens.
We're not going to use ad hominems, the lowest form of argumentation. We are going to look at the actual substance of what Loeb is saying. Now, I have to say, it is difficult to keep up with the pace of discussion here. Loeb is posting frequently on his blog with new ideas about 3i Atlas, which are...
I'm not talking about us as in, like, humans. I'm talking about us as in life, Cosmic, right? The idea that you're traveling... You would, if you detected life, right? Assuming that aliens would have the same level of technology that we do, right? One would assume they have actually, greater technology, but assuming they have, the technology that we have, we can see that there are some fundamental building blocks, we believe, on planets way the fuck outside our local area, right? Like, that's what we can do. So if life is in some way a rarity, then, and you're traveling through space doing stuff, assuming they're not just on their way to some other place, you would want to slow down and take a look at the life, right? Like, we drive and then we see cows and we go, look, cows, right? Like, that could be it. They're coming by, doing some readings of the planet to look at the life. Oh, this planet has life. Oh, let's check out the life. Because life is a rarity in the universe. No matter how common it is, it's still a rarity. Because, like, 1 out of 9 planets in this solar system has it. And the conditions that we believe are required that we can measure outside of this solar system are relatively rare. What up, Ben? Recently discovered a system with a planet that appears to contain dimethyl sulfide. We only know of plankton that can make dimethyl sulfide. I would say that it's our best guess of detecting life off Earth so far. Right, like, it's that kind of thing. We can see little bits of here and there, and then we... but that's why when they talk about that, there might be, there are these things that are related to life, etc., etc.
I'll link to down below. But the crux of his argument is laid out in a scientific...
Sure, but your assumption, Cosmic, is that means something, right? Like, it means something for human beings that traveling, tens of thousands of years would require a particular structure, like generation ships, or cryo sleep, or any science fiction shit you want to throw in there. It's distinctly possible that some alien race could be akin to the immortal jellyfish, right? Where they are capable of achieving a different state that allows them to either exist for a longer lifespan or go to a simpler lifespan, while they're traveling through empty space.
Preprint that was posted on July the 21st. Now, I have to say, when I first saw this paper, I got the impression that Avi himself didn't take this alien hypothesis too seriously, with the conclusion of that paper stating, and I quote, "We strongly emphasize that this paper is largely a pedagogical exercise. By far, the most likely outcome will be that 3i Atlas is a completely natural interstellar object, probably a comet." But over on Avi's blog, he seems much more assertive. In this reply to a reader on August 5th, he states that the probability that 3i Atlas is technological as being 60%, although he seems to have revised that number down to 40% by August 13th. The paper even goes as far as to tie 3i Atlas to the dark forest hypothesis, an idea which I discussed on here recently that poses that interstellar visitors would be malicious, bent on our destruction.
And that's another thing, right? It's going to slow down because there's life, and it's going to fire off its death particle or whatever the hell at the planet and wipe us all out. You know what I mean?
So what exactly is Avi seeing here that causes him to give roughly even odds to such an earth-shattering claim? The paper lists 9 pieces of evidence that 3I Atlas is technological. Now this is a similar approach to his earlier and similar claims about the first interstellar object being alien, Oumuamua, where he listed 6 anomalies. I'm going to broadly group these into 3 categories for the sake of conciseness. 1, trajectory. 2, speed. And 3, excessive size. So let's look at its trajectory first. 3I Atlas is passing through the solar system on what we call a hyperbolic orbit. That means that it's moving too fast to be bound to the sun. Of course, that's what actually defines it as being interstellar in the first place. Right now, it's in between the orbits of Mars and Jupiter, but it's heading inwards, and it will make its closest approach to the sun on the 29th of October, an event that we call perihelion. Perihelion will be at 1.35 AU, but remember...
Another science fiction, not scientific, science fiction possibility is that it's a seed engine. Did you see how closely it was going to pass to Mars there? Maybe it fires off a life form seeding engine or space probe or whatever and lands it on Mars.
The Earth, by definition, lives at 1 AU. So, first off, there is 0 chance of this thing hitting the Earth, or indeed even crossing the Earth's orbit. In fact, its trajectory means that Earth will be as far away from 3I Atlas as it possibly could be during perihelion. We will literally be on the other side of the sun. This is a bit of a bummer because it means we can't observe it when it will be experiencing the greatest amount of radiative stress, when we might expect a huge cometary tail, for example. Now, the paper cites this as one example of its trajectory being indicative of alien technology because it looks like it's trying to hide from us. But look, if alien technology really wanted to hide from us, we wouldn't have detected this thing in the first place. And moreover, its trajectory is essentially the worst possible path if it was a ship interested in the Earth. The closest it gets to us is a whopping 1.8 AU, which occurs on December 19th. So if 3I Atlas is indeed a ship trying to stay hidden from us, then, well, it's not doing a great job. Where 3I Atlas fails, you can succeed, at least online. That's thanks to today's sponsor, Incogni. Staying safe online has never been more important than it is today, because there are AI companies out there that are literally scraping the entire internet, and there are data brokers who are harvesting your data and selling it on beyond your control. And I'm talking private data like your address, telephone number, employment history, medical history, and...
I mean, anything's possible.
So that's why I'm so...
Right? Like, you got to take the person in their entire context. What does a person who has put out over 700 papers, peer-reviewed papers,
over 1,200 data removal requests
have to benefit from baiting us about aliens or baiting someone about aliens?
The new custom removals feature is
like, that's the question.
Powerful. Just paste in the link to
I don't know, man.
where you find your data, and Incogni will take care of the rest.
It'll be interesting.
So, to fight back, enroll in their protection plan at incogni.com/cool.
I mean, maybe maybe it's just like fucking aliens.
Using my code COOLWorlds.
Not saying it's aliens, but fucking aliens.
Online, and there is a 30-day money-back guarantee here. So once again, that's incogni.com/coolworlds and
what
use
up, Larry?
the code COOLWorlds. Now back to the video. Okay, so 3I Atlas doesn't come near to the Earth, but it does get fairly close to some other planets like Mars, Venus, and Jupiter. And this is another component of Avi's argument, where the paper states a probability of this happening of just 1 in 20,000. That number has done a lot of heavy lifting in the popular media, and to the uninitiated, it seems quite convincing. Now, as many of you know, I love myself a bit of statistics.
That's a bold fucking claim there, Cosmic. What up, Silverlight? I wish, but I doubt. Yeah, like that's the thing, right? Like I'm just, is it plausible? There are, again, certain things that I would expect to see if it was actually aliens and it was actually a powered craft and it was actually all those things. You know, I would have expectations, but maybe Avi knows something I don't know. Maybe Avi did get help from the aliens. Maybe Avi's an alien himself and he's waiting on his ride. You know what I mean?
So let's take a deeper look at this. There's a couple of big problems with this number. The first being that technically it is what we would call a p-value. That is, it is a measure of surprisingness. It is the probability of getting a value at least as extreme as the one observed, but critically, only in a world where exclusively the assumed model operates, which here would be random orientations. P-values are deeply problematic when used to make detections, which is to say, to implicitly conduct model selection, because p-values operate in a world where there is no other model, and really there should be another model here, and that model should be alien spacecraft. Despite this, there is a long history of the uninitiated abusing p-values to make spurious scientific claims, known as p-hacking. And it's gotten so bad that p-values are now even banned in several journals. Yet more, the p-value calculated here isn't even correct. It doesn't account for the selection effect of the detection facility in hand, which in this case is Atlas. You see, Atlas does not observe all possible positions equally.
Yes, Cosmic, but it seems doubtful based on what my man said here earlier, and 700 papers probably predating our current round of AI, and also like 50% of papers being published are rubbish. That's a bold claim, Cosmic. I would have to see your data on that one.
Equally, the physical location of the telescope network and weather conditions mean that certain regions get more scrutiny than others, and indeed, such surveys typically have a greater focus on the plane of the solar system planets, the ecliptic, and that's because, of course, asteroids and comets are more likely to be found there. All of this needs to be accounted for, but it isn't. My second issue with this number is that it's arbitrary. The p-value for Mars's closest approach is 4%, Jupiter is 2%, and Venus is 5.5%. Multiply those three probabilities together, and indeed you get...
And there you go. You're a fan of Sabine, and I am not. So...
Loeb's very small number. But what if we considered, say, the Earth instead of Venus? Well, if you do that, the calculation would return a p-value of about 50%. In other words, a completely expected outcome. Or maybe we consider, say, Mercury instead. That would give a p-value of 30%. Or say Saturn, that would give 35%. Or to say that the choice of which planets we include greatly affects the outcome. And of course, the more probabilities we multiply together, the smaller the final value, since probabilities are always...
Yeah, Raza, I avoid using absolutes, like definitely and never and that kind of stuff, wherever possible, right? Like it has a high probability, it has a low probability. These provide the same context without that absolutist functionality. And when you say low probability, you still allow for the possibility of something happening, even if it's extremely unlikely. Liked her first, but quickly saw some problematic tapes, so I stopped watching. Yeah, we did that a while back because she's a transphobe and can't come to terms with it and own it, and maybe get better at about the thing. She did all the classic transphobe things, and so she can fuck off as far as I'm concerned.
Less than 1. At a certain point, these numbers become meaningless. For example, what is the probability of you waking up earlier than, say, 8 a.m. and then drinking your coffee before 8:15 a.m. and then stubbing your toe before 8:30 a.m., etc., etc.? Anyone can engineer very small probabilities out of very mundane events this way. Okay, so leaving trajectory aside, a related point here is speed. Obviously, 3i Atlas's speed is constantly changing as it plunges towards the sun, but its entry speed to the solar system is calculated to be about 58 kilometers per second. Now that sounds very fast, and indeed it certainly is faster than the previous two detected interstellar objects, that is Oumuamua and Borisov. But to put this number into a bit of context, It's so slow that when 3i Atlas would have been entering the solar system, humanity would have been first developing agriculture. The paper sees things differently though, arguing that this speed makes it extremely challenging, if not impossible, for humanity to intercept it. Okay, fine, but 8 days later, Avi Loeb wrote another paper arguing that the Juno spacecraft, which is in orbit of Jupiter, could perform an intercept mission with a fairly modest 2.7 km per second of delta V. So, which one is it? By the way, Juno doesn't have enough fuel left to do this, and its main engine was decommissioned, so this really isn't going to happen. But a Mars orbiter might be a better bet for pulling this off. It's also worth noting that for Oumuamua, Loeb argued that it was its slow velocity, about 26 kilometers per second, that was one of the 6 pieces of evidence that it was technological. So Oumuamua was moving so slow it must be aliens, and 3i Atlas is moving so fast it must be aliens. It feels a little contradictory. And just really to underline this contradiction, I highlight here a paper published last year led by Avi Loeb that predicts that interstellar objects will have a typical velocity very close to that of 3i Atlas, no aliens involved. And indeed, Avi even highlights the success of his earlier prediction in a recent blog post. In general, interstellar objects like this should, on average, speed up as they age, and this is because the longer they hang out in the depths of interstellar space, the more likely it is they will have gravitational encounters that scatter them and thus increase their velocity. Indeed, Hopkins et al. Recently used this scheme to crudely age 3i Atlas as being at least 7.6 billion years old, older than the solar system, whereas Borisov would come in at about 1 billion years old, and Oumuamua would be more like 100 million years old. In this sense, I don't think it's that surprising that 3i Atlas would be older than our sun. After all, the galaxy is 13 billion years old. But if you could make an object like this be hundreds of kilometers per second in speed, then you would have something really interesting that would be worth writing home about. Okay, the third and final evidence theme is...
Yeah, Raza, it would be, how would you, like, what kind of technology would you require in order to generate that kind of field, and for that field to only be projected outwards to counter the acceleration effect, but not affect the people who are on board the spacecraft? You know what I mean? If these were alien, you would expect to see them slowing down if their goal was to do anything but pass through our solar system. Yes. And that's what I was saying earlier when I was talking about this object, Atlas, you know, doing a 180 and then, you know, hitting that deceleration action, right? Like, you know, or they're all dead, right? maybe they shot themselves into space to go visit the next solar system over, and then they all died. And Cosmic's right, because it's a dead spacecraft floating through space.
Is the size of 3i Atlas. So if you take the brightness of this object given its distance from us, it is rather bright. Assuming this is not a spaceship, there are 2 alternative hypotheses. One is a comet, in other words, a clump of dust and ice mixed together, and the other is that it is an asteroid, in other words, a rock. Now, if it were an asteroid, it would have to be huge to explain how bright 3 Atlas is. Now, the true size of an asteroid depends very much on how reflective its surface is, but if it has a similar albedo to other typical asteroids, about 5%, then this object would indeed be very large, about 20 kilometers across, which is larger than Mount Everest. But if instead it is a comet, then it would be far smaller. When a comet approaches a star like 3i Atlas currently is, it becomes active, which means the nucleus starts disintegrating as it heats up, boiling off ices and dust. This forms what we call a coma around the nucleus of the comet. So that's an envelope of material, almost like a mini atmosphere. So that means that even a fairly small comet can get very bright, or reversing that logic, it would mean that 3i Atlas would be far smaller than 20 kilometers in size. Okay, fine, but what has all of this got to do with aliens? Well, if we somehow knew that the comet hypothesis was wrong, then that would leave us with just 2 choices, the asteroid versus the alien hypothesis. And critically, the asteroid hypothesis runs into trouble pretty quick because 20 kilometers is outrageously large for an interstellar rock. Just like the crumbs down the back of your sofa, there should be far more smaller rocks out there than big rocks. And so what this means is that the probability of a 20-kilometer rock passing through the solar system should be a very rare and improbable event. It should happen once every 10,000 years or so. So Avi's essentially leaning on that argument.
Okay, yeah, I'm not sure why that like means that it wouldn't be a giant rock, right? Maybe it's been 10,000 years. It's, you know, low probability of it being a rock due to fucking reasons, but like, you know what I mean?
To say it's very unlikely to be an asteroid and therefore it's more likely to be alien. But hold on, what about the comet hypothesis? Initial spectroscopy reveals reddening of this object, which is consistent with dust and water coming off the thing, which of course is what a comet should do. Although we should look forward to clear results as it gets closer to the sun. But perhaps the most crucial result here is that...
And here's the other thing, like this graph is fine, right? It's a graph. I would like to see other objects, right? Beyond just these three objects to get a contextual, like for a layman, right? Like, you know, that kind of thing.
Forward to clear results as it gets closer to the sun. But perhaps the most crucial result here is that even early observations indicated clear evidence for a coma. Essentially, the object was smeared out more than it would be expected due to telescope diffraction alone. Now that conclusion was widely accepted by planetary scientists, but not by Avi, who suggested that astronomers didn't know how to track comets properly and the smearing wasn't real. This already questionable argument ran into the wall when the Hubble Space Telescope captured the sharpest images yet with a clear coma and even evidence for a tail. Indeed, those observations constrain the nucleus to be smaller than 5.6 kilometers in diameter and possibly as small as just 320 meters across. To backtrack slightly, Avi wrote prior to the Hubble observations the following, essentially saying that the alien hypothesis would be dead if the nucleus were shown to be smaller than 20 kilometers, which is exactly what was found. You would think that the detection of all of this dust would really settle the issue, but Avi next suggested that 3I Atlas was a spacecraft deliberately spewing off dust in order to protect it from impacts with rocks in the solar system like some kind of shield. For me, this is where things get a little bit off the rails, and I have to remind you all of a previous video and paper that I made that is very relevant here. You see, the problem with invoking aliens as a hypothesis to explain a set of observations is that it is too flexible of a theory. It can explain anything.
Sean?
Why did your cup fall off the table? Aliens. What made your curtains move in the night? Aliens. Why are you feeling a little bit unwell today? Aliens. They have what I call unbounded explanatory capability, or UE.
Yes, I love that. Unbounded explanatory capability, right? Like, and again, not to dunk on any religion believers, but religion has this same feature, right? Anything we don't know and have a thing for, oh, it was God, or it was, you know, Thor, or it was whatever, right? Like, or it's aliens, or aliens is God.
EC, like Carl Sagan's demon-haunted world.
Chef, this guy is fantastic. Cool Worlds. This guy is fan-fucking-tastic. Highly recommended. Give them a follow. They have great content and very easy to listen to, and like that.
World, aliens could be everywhere, responsible for everything. And whatever evidence we amass that seemingly defies the predictions of our alien hypothesis, such as 3I Atlas having no coma, the alien hypothesis is infinitely malleable and can always explain that too. Why? Because aliens meant to do that. Whenever we invoke aliens as a band-aid for anomalies, it's God of the gaps. It is a shell of a theory that lacks any predictive soul. Now, despite all of this, there are many genuinely interesting things about 3I Atlas. For example, it shows coma, but the tail is only tentatively detected, and Yet more, the coma seems to bulge out from the sun-facing side rather than from the rear. However, it has to be said that anisotropic mass loss like this is in fact quite common in comets, caused by the preferential sublimation of ice on the warmer sun-facing side. Another slight oddity is the lack of any gas emission, which is typically associated with active comets, gases like CN, OH, and C2. However, it's also not that unusual for a comet at this distance from the sun to not present any of those gases at this stage. So a key test will be continuous monitoring of this object as it gets closer and closer, where we really should expect to see some of those gases come off. The James Webb Space Telescope has already observed the object once, and the data should be coming out soon, so that will indeed give us much more insight here. So all in all, I would say that 3I Atlas looks very comet-like right now. As the saying goes, if it looks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's aliens. I mean a duck. So I encourage you to make up your own mind here, but my personal...
And I don't know, maybe, maybe Avi kind of looks like an alien, right? Like maybe Avi's an alien and these are his people and they're either coming to pick him up or coming to bring us a bright new alien future or coming to wipe us out. And one of those things could be true.
Take is that Avi has just made the wrong call here, and I'm sure he disagrees with that view.
It smells musty in here. Like a bureaucrat's office.
Why would a man with a long and brilliant service abandon the fundamental principles that he has believed in, even fought for, all of his life?
You're a fool, Picard. History will look at you and say, this man was a fool.
I'll accept the judgment of history.
On the one hand, I want to acknowledge what a formidable scientific career Avi has lived. For example, recently I was studying one of his old papers on the future evolution of the universe, and I found it both inspiring and brilliant. He has always been a gentleman to me, and I know of many young people who have been deeply moved and influenced by his outreach, even entering science as a result of it. One cannot trivially dismiss that. But at the same time, I think often his framing of these arguments does a disservice to his substance. For example, in response to Professor Chris Lintot's criticism, he suggested that this could be an alien Turing test for intelligence that clearly he passes but Lintot fails. To me, this kind of stuff cheapens his arguments, as do the repeated comparisons of his work to that of Galileo, his recent decision to invent a scale named after himself, the Loeb scale, and deflecting criticisms with ad hominem attacks, such as labeling critics as having never written a single paper or being second-rate scientists. I have tried to address all of Avi's claims today in good faith, the substance of them, not his character, not his demeanor, just the science. And I think his rebuttals would gain a lot more traction if they focused in that same arena.
Right.
Scientists disparaging other scientists, which, to be clear, has happened in both directions here, isn't productive.
As you know, you failed to gain tenure at the University of Chicago. You're not highly regarded in the field.
Who the fuck is this guy?
Highly advise you to spend more time in your physics department and less time on YouTube.
When Eric Weinstein called out...
Fuck Eric Weinstein. I thought I recognized that guy. Fuck Eric Weinstein. Just fuck that guy. Go watch Echoplex Media and ask Dave about Eric Weinstein, and he'll tell you.
Sean Carroll for not getting tenure at Chicago and being a mediocre scientist, whereas Sean just stuck to the content of Weinstein's claims, we all took a collective sigh. Falling back on ad hominem is, in my book, akin to conceding you're wrong. Another point in Loeb's defense, though, is that he is walking an important and very delicate fine line. Groupthink is dangerous, and there are seeds of truth in his writing, because, at least in my estimation, he's right when he says that most astronomers do not take seriously the idea that interstellar objects could be alien technology, and Avi has been publicly ridiculed for suggesting so by his colleagues. But the truth is that whether it be aliens or something else provocative, we have to be willing to challenge conventional wisdom. science depends on original ideas. And so some scientists will don their wax wings and fly as close to the glare of originality as they.
That's a great image. I love that.
dare. And sometimes they will fly too close. Their wings will melt and they'll crash down to earth unceremoniously. But like an entrepreneur that fails, we have to be willing to keep trying, to keep an open mind and pushing the frontiers. To walk that line, I believe, is in many ways courageous because you indeed risk ridicule and huge public failure. I mean, I know I have felt that several times. But if we stop taking those risks, if we just stick to conservatism, then we will stall in our advancement. So maybe here, aliens is the wrong call. It certainly looks that way. But I want to appreciate Avi's effort to try and advance the field forward. He has shifted the Overton window and it has galvanized new work, new conversations, and new ideas. So until next time, stay thoughtful and
I'm okay to go. I'm okay to go. I'm okay to go. I'm okay to go. Why build one when you can build two at twice the price? Contact is a fun movie, right? Like, I'm not. I too enjoy some Contact. I think one of my spoilers for a fucking 80-year-old movie. One of my favorite things is like the original design that the aliens send us doesn't have the command chair. And so the first thing that happens when it transitions into the alien space is that the fucking command chair breaks. Like, we gave you the plans. All you had to do was follow the plan. What up, Hydron?
stay curious.
Thank you for making it to the end of this video, everybody. Be sure.
You're welcome. Up next, speaking of Star Trek, as we did, new Damien.
Hit that like and subscribe button because if you've made it this far, then you must enjoy our content. And if you really want to help us out, you can become a supporter to my research.
Jeez, how do you have so many executive producers? I need an executive producer.
Team, the Cool Words Lab, just like our latest donors, that is Warren Smith and Brad Buich. Thank you so much.
You've got so many. Give me one. Just send me one. Send me the Queen, whatever the fuck Queen thing that was.
For your support, guys. So you can use the link up above and down below where.
I think all the executive producers are the Patreon. Yeah. Monochromatic has it. Yeah. I'm joking. I'm being facetious.
You too can become a cool worlder and get lots of perks. So until next time, see you around the galaxy.
Is a world state inevitable? Damien Walter versus Feral Historian. From what we've seen, Silverlight, he's good. Read and Rap, mod for the channel, recommends his content and says that he knows what he's talking about. And those two are good enough for me. People look at Icarus, they often leave out that Daedalus was successful. Very nice, Sean.
Cricket is a game that we British invented and have exported to the world.
You gotta know what a crumpet is to understand cricket. Also, I have a cricket ball. Because while some people will have a like a baseball, to toss back and forth, I decided to get a cricket ball because why the fuck not? I want a cricket bat. I think I'm going to finally break down and get one. Just Shaun of the Dead, right? Like, I have a collection of tools and implements just in case something happens. I think a cricket bat is something that I need in my life.
World, assuming
I think you're
that
doing crime.
having invented the rules of cricket,
I am confident you're doing crime. And I'm wearing that same shirt. Larry, do I come to your spot and blow it up? I do not, right? Don't worry about what I'm doing.
we would always win by them. In fact, the whole point of cricket was that it didn't have any real rules. Cricket is a game so slow and tedious that the winner is whoever can stay awake to the end while drinking gin. But we British had a problem. We had built a global trading network, aka empire, that covered a quarter of the world's landmass. But it turns out that governing an empire is very, very expensive.
This is not particularly AI-oriented, Cosmic. It's Sunday.
So we were trying to get the empire to govern itself, but still give us the money. What if the disparate British colonies govern themselves in their own ways, but within an agreed rules of cricket? We even thought about renaming our empire the Federation. The Brits came this close to founding the first federal world state. And in the unlikely event that any of our colonies ever came close to winning at cricket, we the English, knower of the rules of cricket, could just invent some new rules to make it so that we win. Welcome to the rules-based global order.
Or lawyers, guns, and money, but in reverse order.
True.
And this is where we live, on a blue dot. On that blue dot, that's where everyone you know and everyone you ever heard of and every human being who ever lived out their lives.
Seen from the orbit of Saturn, Earth really is just a pale blue dot. Any godlike alien entity surveilling us would no doubt be astounded to discover some 200 polities, plus an assortment of non-geographic alternatives.
Ponder Monkey, everybody's dead, except us.
Competing for dominance of this insignificant speck of mud. And historians of the future will wonder how those 200 plus polities made it to whatever year it is we eventually nuke each other, or are swept away by climate conflicts, or collapse under resource depletion, or. The pale blue dot poses us a question. How do we, in the words of Carl Sagan, preserve the only home we've ever known? That's a question with no easy answers. Every great philosopher who's ever lived has asked how humans can better live together. But maybe we can find...
Is Cosmos available on YouTube where I can play it without running into... I'm not against the idea. Cosmos. Hey, yo. I got an episode 1. It's an hour long. Yeah, I think we might be in business. If it's on YouTube, you can play it. Is what I'm getting from all these people playing fucking full-length movies during their stream. And shit like that. So yeah, let's I will see if I can find somebody who has like a whole collection of the Cosmos videos. And we'll go from there. Yeah, that's what I'm saying, Old Lobster. Like, the rules are fucking... What are the rules, man?
Find some ideas in science fiction.
I thought I understood the rules, and then the rules change, and now I don't understand the rules anymore, and I'm scared and alone.
Star Trek remains, almost 6 decades on from its inception, the most optimistic and achievable vision of a positive human future. We could definitely do worse.
2 men enter, 1 man leaves.
By achievable, I don't mean we're going to be riding our Kubier Drive starships to the Vulcan homeworld anytime soon. Because Star Trek isn't really a story about warp drives, matter transporters, replicators. These are merely plot devices which allow Gene Roddenberry's vision to unfold. Star Trek is the story of worlds, strange new worlds, and how those worlds are.
Yeah, I'm just... Like, I don't know if that works in the sense, Old Lobster, of like copyright, etc. Like, again, I prefer to find things on YouTube unless I know for certain they're in the public domain, because it would just be annoying to get banned at this point in my career. I've done such a good job. No copyright strikes, no bans, and I like that.
Governed. Star Trek introduced billions of us to the idea that we could think of worlds as a whole, and how...
Yeah, Discord's a whole other animal, Cosmic, and I'm a fan. I do not want that. Thank you. But what happens when you do a Discord thing, like, because we used to watch movies in Discord, and about 3 to 5 people would show up. Some consistently, others not so much, right? Like, what up, Princess Kimberly?
Our world as a whole is governed. Star Trek is about a galactic federal government, the Federation, modelled on the federal government of the United States, and the efforts to expand the federal model of governments to the...
Yeah, and that's the thing, Old Lobster. It's just, it's a lot to ask for people to consistently do it. We used to do movie night every Friday night, Peter. We would do the stream, and then we would do movie night every Friday night. And we did it for, I don't know, we watch a fuck ton of movies. We watch, like, a bunch of the Terminators, if not all the Terminators, you know? Just anything having to do with AI and that kind of shit. At least 20 weeks of movies that we did where they were AI movies. We watched, fuck, many of them. It's not your bad. It's just, it was a thing. Yeah, it's an additional layer. Her, we definitely watched Her. We watched a bunch of the Terminators, if not all of the Terminators. We watched, I don't know, Blade Runner. Yeah, we did Blade Runner and Blade Runner 2, Electric Boogaloo.
The world and the galaxy via the United Nations. Star Trek is an idealized representation of federal government that has arisen after a global nuclear war. And the idea that federal governance could bring peace first to our world, then to the galaxy.
2001, that was big. 2001 and 2010, yeah.
And that is the Star Trek vision we could achieve. The governance of Earth as a federation of states, unified in a federal world state. I feel a disturbance in the comments section, as if millions of libertarians cried out in terror. Absolutely, 100%. The reality of such a federal world state would not be the fantasy of Star Trek, but it would at least be a government of humanity, by humanity, for humanity, not machines.
I'm ready. Carve away.
I kind of want the Psycho History shirt. I'm not gonna lie.
Excellent. Let's do this.
William Gibson's Neuromancer is a world where humans are becoming machines. It has some interesting parallels to Star Trek. The novel that invented cyberpunk is also set after a global war has collapsed national governments. But instead of rebuilding a federal world state, Earth is now owned by competing corporate oligarchies.
The first time I died, I was 99. New technology transferred my consciousness to a new body.
Who have, with cloning and cryogenics, achieved virtual immortality. There are no dates in Neuromancer. The story could be happening in 2025 or in 2125. The world is trapped in an endless now, a relentless cycle of capitalist exploitation, with elite wealth extraction driving the conversion of our world into one vast machine. So Neuromancer, published in 1984, seems eerily like 2025, on a timeline where humanity is becoming the Borg. The essence of cyberpunk is the replacement of the human with the machine, limbs replaced with cybernetic implants, imagination substituted with virtual reality. Neuromancer is the future where human animal is being transformed into a cybernetic machine. Science fiction can imagine infinite futures, but I fear that our realistic choices from here in 2125 are between Neuromancer and Star Trek, between global machinic oligarchy or a fallible, all-too-human world state.
Hello? Hello?
Predict the future of humankind with the equation of psychohistory itself on a t-shirt from the merch store. The argument over the world state in science fiction began with the near simultaneous publication of Aldous Huxley's Brave New World in 1932 and H.G. Wells'
Shout out Damien for like seemingly living like his best life, right? Like my man is always just going places, doing things. They'll sit down to film a video. I have no idea what he does, but he always seems like he's having a good time.
The Shape of Things to Come in 1933. Wells is an optimistic vision of a world state emerging to bring peace to Earth after a world war. It could almost be seen as a prequel to Star Trek. Wells was a vocal supporter of a federal world state, but his depiction of its emergence is problematic. Mass aerial bombing is how the world state brings peace, in an eerie premonition of the decades that followed.
This is a Tomahawk cruise missile, and when it's fired, all hell breaks loose for the enemy.
And once established, the world state looks and sounds scarily totalitarian.
Yeah, I'm not sure, Silverlight, but yeah, there's the title is Damien Walter versus Feral Historian, so I would expect that to be the case. I haven't watched any Feral Historian because so one of the problematic things when you go on YouTube and someone is something historian, you never know what you're going to get. And I am always concerned about fucking up my well-curated algorithm by allowing in some fucking cheesehead who's gonna come on and spout some bullshit and And then I have to deal not only with that person's content in my feed, but all associated minions of darkness that come along with it. So it's like a box of white chocolate.
If not fully.
But is Feral Historian, Silver Lake, can you advocate for Feral Historian that I won't have that experience and then it's okay to watch? Or the opposite, either one.
Fascist.
The British Union of Fascists thought so too. I suspect that if social media existed in the 1930s, the Buff would have successfully co-opted the film for their own ends.
The worrying thing about Huxley's
That must
World
be
State
him.
is how many people today actually think it sounds quite all right, really. Brave New World's satire of American liberalism, with material plenty, a genetically enforced class system, and infinite drugs to dull the boredom, looks near identical to Francis Fukuyama's End of History. The future that liberals want is like fascism seen from the inside. Together, Wells and Huxley show us the dark side of the world state,
Me too,
its
man.
tendency to technocratic control, the decay of individualism into hedonism, and the unfortunate habit of liberalism, when times get tough, to transform into fascism. So if the world state comes with the constant threat of totalitarian fascism, what are our alternatives for a world state without a state?
I heard without a state, and I'd like to know more.
One of the great ironies of the 20th century is how...
Okay, so that gives me anarchist vibes. Now, whether they are libertarian anarchist or left anarchist remains to be seen, but I'm getting vibes that I feel like I can watch Feral Historian without issue.
how and why socialism became, in the minds of many, equal
I understood
to
that reference,
statism.
Old Lobster.
When socialism, in all its varieties, aims for the complete dismantling of the state.
I wouldn't put it necessarily like that, Sean. Because those who are doing like the the CIA type work on behalf of the Federation are often looked at by the other members of the Federation as like, the bad guys. So like counter to the mission of the Federation as stated. So haven't the recent series been prequels? Discovery is kind of a prequel and kind of not. Strange New Worlds is definitely a prequel.
I tend to think that socialism is as socialism does.
True.
Early works of utopian socialist science fiction, like Edward Bellamy's Looking Backward, 1888, William Morris Lee's From Nowhere, 1890, and Alexander Bogdanov's Red Star, have in common varied depictions of a classless and stateless society that had come to be called communism. But short-lived attempts at communist stateless state, like the Paris Commune of 1871, led political philosophers like Karl Marx and others to theorize the need for a temporary state structure during the transition to communism, which Marx called the dictatorship of the proletariat. The problem was that this dictatorship became, in practice, far from temporary. Anarchist thinkers.
And this right here, yeah, this is the fundamental break between communists and anarchists as they currently exist. Communists believe in, basically an anarchist future, but it has to go through this state system first. and anarchists believe that, and this is broadly speaking and doesn't cover everybody, etc., many crime buddies, many caveats. Anarchists believe, that basically anybody who achieves power is not going to give it up. So, like, by doing that, you're going to, you're just submitting yourself to, a future state and a dictatorship, not of the proletariat, but of people who represent the proletariat, which comes with all its own set of problems.
Like Mikhail Bakunin correctly predicted that Marxism in power would lead to not temporary.
Oh, Ben, he is definitely not a liberal. He is some manner of socialist, but is what I agree is that we can critique anything. What up, hey pretty one? I don't, anyone who says, oh, we can't critique like in its current state, right, in the here and now, you can't critique China because look at USA bad, right? I don't give a shit. I'm going to critique both the United States and China. All states are bastards. All states do state shit. I'm going to do the critique.
But permanent state dictatorship. George Orwell's 1984 and the novel which somewhat inspired Orwell, Evgeny Zamyatin's We, both illustrate the inevitable collapse of Marx's dictatorship of the proletariat into bureaucratic totalitarianism. But state dictatorship is the failure state of socialism. The real lesson of 20th century socialism is that attempts to do away with the state inevitably leads to the worst and most brutal forms of the state. But if the left can't do without the state, what of the right? Works of capitalist utopian science fiction are relatively rare. Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged is arguably the only truly significant work of capitalist utopian science fiction. The capitalists, led by the enigmatic John Galt, decide to go on strike and establish their own capitalist utopia to show the statist liberals and socialists how it's done. And nobody notices. What Atlas Shrugged inadvertently but quite hilariously demonstrates is that the high-speed technological progress which drives profits for the capitalists is actually a net negative for most of humanity, who lead happier lives without capitalists, just at a slower rate of progress.
And the kind of progress that capitalism has excelled at for the last 80 years or so is the sort built on programmed obsolescence and throwaway products. But how much better might our products be, and how much more efficient our use of resources, if brand loyalty was built on a generational timescale rather than just as hype for next year's model?
All right, I'm going to watch Feral Historian. He appears to like be about it. Like I'm liking what he's saying. Ayn Rand is utopian, right? Like it's the thing. It's just they're very Ayn Randian about it.
Is throwaway capitalism a perversion or an inevitable result?
Nonetheless, Atlas Shrugged is the inspiration for a wave of sci-fi novels posing as non-fiction from ambitious tech bro capitalists, including Alex Karp's Technological Republic and Balaji Srinivasan's Networked State. If these right-wing visions of a techno-utopian stateless state were ever realized, one of two things would happen. Either the Silicon Valley elite would disappear up their own Galt's Gulch, or they would become the capitalist corporate oligarchies.
Hydron, so dictatorship of the proletariat comes from Engels and Marx. Lenin introduced the idea of the vanguard party to establish the dictatorship of the proletariat. So I think that's what you were, where you were at with that.
Of Neuromancer, in the grip of an amphetamine-induced psychotic break, his delusions shaped by multiple readings of William Gibson's Neuromancer, the British philosopher Nick Land wrote his famous work of theory fiction, the work which defined the extreme right-wing philosophy of accelerationism and a hyperdense examination of the techno-capitalist singularity. From The Invisible Hand of Adam Smith to Karl Marx's Vampire of Dead Labour to the rhizome of Deleuze and Guattari, philosophers had speculated that capitalism is best understood not as a simple economic system, but as a self-governing cybernetic entity, deterritorializing human civilization and human beings, and re-territorializing us as the body of a new cybernetic life form, emerging from the techno-capitalist singularity. If you want a picture of the future, imagine all human life on Earth assimilated into the Borg. Not by a cube from outer space, but by a cybernetic god, born from the logic of capitalism. Neuromancer is the toned-down version of...
So I guess Cosmic, it is AI related. We got there.
...the post-human, transhuman, accelerationist nightmare. And the only thing we know of in the galaxy that can defeat the Borg is the Federation. But we were talking about cricket. We Brits invented cricket as a game we would always win, and then proceeded to lose at cricket in ever more humiliating ways for over a century. But the British Empire laid the foundations of the federal world state from a mixture of self-interest, corruption, power maneuvers, and lofty idealism. And the American empire built on top of those foundations for the same reasons. The irony for the conspiracy-minded who fear a globalist new world order is that we've been living in that order since 1945. The US federal government has been the de facto government of the world state since the end of World War II. For better or worse, it's likely the only reason we haven't nuked each other yet. And now, like cricket, the other players in the game of the federal world state are increasingly learning to win or even rewrite the rules. It's corrupt, chaotic, at times brutal, unfair and heartbreaking. But the most important thing about our emergent federal world state is that it's human. This sickening, fascinating geopolitical mess is what human self-government looks like. And it's the only thing that can keep humanity in the game of determining our own future against the relentless opposition of the machine, Star Trek or Neuromancer. If you want our future not to be post-human or transhuman or as inhuman as the accelerationism of the Borg cybernetic life form, the world state isn't just inevitable, it's our best bet.
All right, we're doing a detour.
Imagine, if you will, that this is one country, a world state, perhaps a federation like the Star Trek ideal of unity and prosperity. But whether an extension of our liberal traditions or a throwback to feudalism or empire, there's a deep cultural assumption of progress toward unification in some form. The outright advocacy of H.G. Wells, Bogdanov's Martian Socialist State and Red Star, even super-civilizations like Ian Banks' Culture or Cordwainer Smith's Instrumentality of Man, to name just a few. And of course, those ambiguous ones like Brave New World or Starship Troopers, which can be both utopian and dystopian, depending on who you ask. Perhaps most dystopian of all, the world state is accreting around us from the bloated carcass of 20th century liberalism, shaping up to be something that serves not all of mankind, but rather soulless technocrats, dirt league Stalins, and tech bros aspiring to be aristocrats.
Or could it be a nice game of cricket?
Whatever form it takes, the trend line seems to be that as our cultures, economies, and perceptions become more global in scope, so too will our systems of government. Smaller units joining larger ones in an inevitable tide of historical progress.
Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev announced he is resigning as head of the Soviet Communist Party and recommended that the party's ruling Central Committee be disbanded.
Right. There's a counter trend we can't ignore. Not only the breakup of the Soviet Union, but the splitting of some of its satellite states. Czechoslovakia no longer exists, nor does Yugoslavia. The European Union strains from baked-in flaws that threaten its long-term prospects, and it's an open question whether the United Kingdom will remain.
Speaking of shirts, don't feed the Leviathan. I love this one too.
So, even the fracturing of the United States, however unlikely, is within that cone of possibility.
It's worth noting here that our collapsed and failed states are all attempts to resist or oppose our emergent capitalist world state, most notably the failed Soviet project. If the US implodes, it will be because of nationalist resistance to transnationalism. The bloated carcass of liberalism has steamrolled all alternatives, either economically or, total war.
To examine the idea of a world state is to mire oneself in a sea of contradictions, so let's begin with perhaps the most basic. Right now we have strong trends toward globalization on multiple fronts, but also a pervasive loss of faith in institutions at the national and international level over a multitude of issues. With that in mind, along with the long history of the rise and fall of empires, we have to ask not only whether a world state is inevitable, but given the political and cultural divisions, the scale of the thing, and the lack of trust, is it even possible? As is so often the case, science fiction is a rich field for gaming it out, for exploring not only the pros and cons of vast federations and empires, but for sidestepping the minutiae of politics, constitutions, and procedural rules to instead focus on the core truths about our history, our ambitions, and ourselves. And one of those truths is that the story of human progress in technology, in culture, and in ever larger and more complex systems of government is a story of war. In our era, we divide the world into countries. We think of places in terms of borders and flags. But the nation-state is the result not of a natural tendency toward more clearly defined political units, but of the 30 Years' War. The Peace of Westphalia, in delineating the limits of church authority and territorial sovereignty, effectively ended the loosely bound Holy Roman Empire and its spattering of principalities and gave us the framework for the modern nation-state. That framework worked well enough until the 20th century, when two moves toward a proto-global governance structure were taken, first with the League of Nations following the Great War, and then the United Nations after World War II. One of the world state's most vocal proponents, H.G. Wells, dramatized this process in his book The Shape of Things to Come, which depicted a devastating world war nearly destroying civilization. Only the intervention of a militant technocratic cabal imposing a world government turned mankind away from a long dark age and toward a brilliant united future. This is the same basic premise baked into Star Trek, with humanity going to the stars and building the Enlightened Federation coming about only after we nearly destroyed ourselves in a nuclear war. Though Trek infuses it with a heavy dose of post-war liberalism that softens the edges of Wells' vision. A vision that looks remarkably fascist in hindsight. Both our history and our stories point to these steps up to higher orders of organizational forms requiring lubrication and blood. A war of unification, conquest, call it what you will.
Wings over the world.
And we can't bring up fascism in a world state without talking about Robert Heinlein's Starship Troopers, which isn't fascist at all.
Isn't it, though? Not even a teeny tiny little bit fascist. Just a bit.
One little xenocide. Fortunately, the bug cuddlers can't vote, because the state Heinlein describes is a representative republic that, like our own, doesn't let non-citizens vote, or felons, or children. At the start of the last century, women couldn't vote. Race, property ownership, restricting the franchise to those deemed suitably qualified or invested has a long history. The Federation is very much in line with that representative republic tradition. But in Starship Troopers, military service is the only route to citizenship. We'll do the excruciatingly detailed deep dive on that another time. The Terran Federation's focus on only allowing those willing to put themselves in the position of potentially engaging in or being the recipient of violence on behalf of the state is a recognition that there's a direct and inseparable link between the two. The German sociologist Max Weber presented a core concept of the modern state, which has since been widely paraphrased as, the state has a monopoly on violence. This is often held up as an indicator of legitimacy. Feudal rulers did not have a monopoly on violence. Kings had to work with a network of vassals through a web of patronage, oaths, and obligations if they wanted to wage a war. Modern nation-states consolidate that power. Of course, as with any model, it doesn't describe reality with complete accuracy, whether we're talking about organized crime syndicates, revolutionary movements, or a particularly notable outlier, the British East India Company, which grew from a trading company to a transnational megacorporation controlling, to varying degrees, the Indian subcontinent and a significant portion of the world's wealth. A corporation that gradually acquired an army, a civil service, tax collectors, and all the other apparatus of governing. The basic premise would not be out of place in a cyberpunk novel. A world state, whether on a federal or imperial model, would have to assert its monopoly on violence in some way, and yet today, that monopoly is cracking. It's not only states that have armies, whether religious pseudo-state entities like ISIS or the global rise of private military companies, for example, the now defunct Wagner Group in Russia or American firms like the oft-rebranded Blackwater. All of it gives us some very early hints of a future that looks less like Star Trek and more like Hammer Slammers. David Drake's series gives us a fine depiction of a mercenary army taking over a state that tried to stiff them on the bill, then having to govern while taking contracts. Sort of the East India Company with hover tanks. And just to keep things good and businesslike, all the private armies work through the bonding authority that reviews contract terms, holds payments in escrow, and maintains ratings of the various mercenary companies, while otherwise remaining aloof from the petty politics of the wars they're hired to fight. Is this what an ANCAP United Nations looks like? Perhaps we should paraphrase Weber with a bit more subtlety. The ability to monopolize violence effectively lets one define what is and is not legitimate to the population under it. A world state would have a lot of people over a wide territory, some of whom would need to be periodically convinced of its legitimacy. Doing so through mixed nationality private military companies could be a viable way of declawing what had been independent sovereign states.
We don't approve of independent sovereign states. You don't approve? We mean to stop them.
In time, a world army could be created from the pieces, but that takes a generation or two of cultural acclimation to the idea. Something like a scaled-up French Foreign Legion, perhaps with world citizenship as part of the recruitment pitch.
Service guarantees citizenship.
Of course, ideally, a world state wouldn't need an army, but even the benevolent and peaceful United Federation of Planets has its space navy and the threat of Klingons and Romulans and the Borg. Scary thems out there to prop up the collective idea of us. As my colleague Damian Walter points out, Star Trek got us to think about worlds as single things. Klingons, Vulcans, Romulans, each of them not just a planet with a global government, but a single unified people. Absent some immediate outside threat, are we capable of thinking that way about our own world? We're tribal at a very basic level. Our subsequent group identities have been grafted onto that idea of the tribe, sort of our core operating system. But can we ever expand that to not only think of but feel all of humanity as our tribe, or is it simply too big and too abstract?
A consequence of our not finding aliens with forehead ridges is the absence of that essential other on a planetary scale. Not that I'm suggesting faking the incursion of a multi-dimensional alien threat and committing a gigadeath crime to achieve global unity without global war.
Yeah, it probably wouldn't work anyway. Half the people would assume it's a deep state psyop and the other half would blame the Russians. The level of internal discord in many large nation states is not encouraging. All the instability of conflicts over racial issues, immigration, religious and political alignment is at a basic level just different tribes living in the same territory. So maybe what we need isn't a state, but a culture. Ian M. Banks, in his series of novels, gives us a look at The Culture, a sprawling, hyper-advanced society whose people live in a post-scarcity paradise, while machines make sure things keep running smoothly. While trying to place the culture, a godlike civilization governed by hyper-intelligent AI minds, on the political spectrum would be a bit silly, it is worth noting that, like Star Trek, in some ways it can be interpreted as an end-of-history triumphant liberalism where our problems have been solved by technology, everyone is happy, and nothing much ever happens for the most part. The culture isn't a state or even a single culture in the unifying sense we tend to associate with the word, but more a prescient look at some of the trends of our time. For example, 20th century America had a rather strong national superculture. We watched the same shows, we got our news from the same networks and papers. We weren't all the same, but we all lived in this common frame of reference.
Broadly speaking, Chef, I think so. It's been a long time since I looked at the Zeitgeist movement. I'm not sure where they are. There were, I don't know, some things that at the time, and I can't elucidate what they were at this point, but there were some things that I felt were like questionable with how they were going about what they were going about, but that always could have been my interpretation. I don't have enough data to give you a good answer.
Today, that's no longer the case. We can all find our incredibly niche interest groups, watch whatever movies we feel like in our own homes, and get our news from whatever sources will best affirm our cherished preconceptions. We're fragmenting into microcultures. One of the many things Banks does with these books is give us stories set in a world that takes that idea and projects it forward to its logical conclusion. A vastly diverse web facilitating all manner of bliss-seeking and self-modification with the shared value of letting everyone be weird in their own ways. A shimmering cloak of anarchy made possible by the expert management of the minds. To quote the author's own description, the culture is hippie commies with hyperweapons and a deep distrust of both marketolatry and greedism. And yet, on another level, the culture projects forward in a straight line from the post-World War II Western hegemonic outlook, because the culture knows that their way is the best way, and they have no qualms about interfering in other worlds' affairs. If Star Trek's United Federation of Planets operates on an extrapolation of the modern progressive left idea that all cultures are equally valid, the culture, through its contact group, agency, whatever we want to label it, operates more like the CIA or MI6. They'll readily interfere in the internal affairs of weaker societies, sometimes with subtle nudges and sometimes blatantly, to make sure that the good guys, as perceived by them, win out.
I'm paraphrasing what Kel Thickness said, and I could be wrong. And if I am wrong, then it's entirely on me and nothing on them. It's my misinterpretation of what they were talking about. But so one of the things that they were talking about on a couple different occasions was like, because within any state, there's different cultural groups who were subsumed by that state that at some point in their history had more distinct languages and cultures and all that kind of stuff, right? Like they had their own thing going on. And they made an argument for breaking up these states into smaller and smaller units in a way to like destroy the concept of the border, right? Because if I'm going from, like, for instance, Paris to Brussels and I have to cross 15, 20 different borders in order to do that, then the argument follows that you could just do away with borders being an issue as far as crossings go. I don't know how I feel about that as a concept. It is akin to the idea of local autonomous groups, like an anarchist kind of thing. But it's one of those things that, like, I'm not sure how I feel about it, kind of thing. I'm wanting to ask because last time I knew about them was when I briefly joined the Toronto chapter before I went to deliver for my dad's bakery 2.5 years ago. So I have no idea about the past 15 or so years. Yeah, I'm with you on that. You know, like,
There's no hand-wringing over a prime directive in the culture. In fact, interfering with other societies for the greater good is one of the few meaningful things a member of the culture can do with their life. Because while the culture is very open, very prosperous, and in many ways very appealing, it's also like a weekend in Vegas. You can have a good time, but you're not going to find any deeper meaning or purpose in it. The culture is so comfortable that everything has become gamified, and they're so powerful that they don't have to.
Yeah, it's one of those things with nationalist movements, and by nationalist I mean like where a culture is trying to achieve a nation state for the recognition of their people. Kurdistan is an example of that kind of thing. There's many of them. And like, on one hand, I understand how liberation politics relates to that kind of nationalist movement. Ireland's another way, like because of the Northern Ireland situation. But like, I'm just like, where does it end? Right? I don't know. It's a nuanced, detailed conversation that I would need. I need to have another conversation with Kel Thickness to try and wrap my mind around the entire concept and examine its like benefits and plausibility. What up, TN? Hope you're doing well, homie.
To care. Going through life on God mode, making the galaxy more like themselves with every contact or special circumstance intervention.
Right, in that kind of behavior, Chef, they like, and borders with straight lines, right, leads to a shattering effect within that particular state, and then that particular state has some sort of dominant group that, in some fashion, even if it's in a really nice way, the exploitation of the less dominant group within that state, right? So there's a bunch of problems that exist within that, and as a tool of imperialism and stuff like that, like, it has a long storied history. I'm working on the idea of International Indigenous Coalition. Cool. Yeah, no. We're having a fun little Sunday fun day, where we wandered into aliens territory. Now we're doing like the concept of one world government, and it's the two videos that are like, talking to each other, which I think is neat.
The culture has assumptions and preferences, of course. They're living in the end of history, except for those developing nation screwheads that have to be guided into their own best interests from time to time, and woe to those whose values don't align. I think we can expect much of the same from a world state. So I have to wonder, what does that mean for our own cultures going forward?
I think this...
Yeah, that This is, for those of you who don't know, the way you get a mountain like this is you have a volcano, a very, very old volcano, and the rock out on the outside of the volcano is softer than the hardened rock on the inside of the volcano. So all the outside wears away, and you're left with this. I don't know if this is the Devil's Tower, but Devil's Tower is an example of exactly that. It's featured in Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
What does that mean for our own cultures going forward?
I think this explains the emergence of a more muscular liberalism post 9/11 that is now more comfortable asserting its cultural superiority as the global hegemon. You can be any colour you like as long as you're capitalist and at least nod to human rights. Think of the world Sam Harris would make.
Oh.
And we live in a time when the idea of diversity has become fetishized, either as the root of all social problems for some or a positive good unto itself for others. Neither mindset is very helpful here. I'm talking about a basic sense of different customs, different perspectives, different ways of thinking. Does a world state...
I found this, The Shape of Things to Come. I believe I found it on YouTube. So we might do, I don't know. We might do some long form, like watch a movie content at some point in time.
Inevitably lead to the culture, singular, global cultural homogeneity, at least on that superculture level that frames everything else.
It's so bubbly and cloying.
It's not a question of national superculture versus microculture so much as one of market share. Does that broad, vague...
Or as an alternative, as opposed to watching the 1936 black and white joint, I also found a version of it that is a 1979 Canadian space opera. That would be something.
Defined superculture have enough to shepherd the ever-shifting microcultures all into one general direction, or do they dominate and fragment into indifferent or opposed tribes? A set of shared assumptions can have a significant impact on how those microcultures form, manifest, and interact. Whoever dominates the world state at its founding is very well positioned to set the cultural foundation of humanity for all time going forward, at least in some very general ways. But to bring this back around, culture serves another role beyond merely being a sort of social operating system or transmission vector for a set of values and assumptions. As tribal creatures, we form our own group identities, at least partially in terms of we're not them. 150. According to the British anthropologist Robin Dunbar, that's roughly the number of people that we as individual humans can maintain a real social relationship with, a strong connection or sense of kinship to. And while the actual number is widely debated and varies between individuals, the point is that we have a remarkably small group that we're able to feel socially invested in. That connection rapidly falls off when we're looking at larger groups. Culture is a way of extending that bond to larger groups. If you've ever been traveling in a foreign country and you meet someone from your own city, there's an instant connection there, even if back home you wouldn't have anything to do with this person. Sharing a cultural foundation can extend that tribal affinity to large anonymous groups, at least to some extent, and cultural differences between those groups reinforce the sense of connection within them. We're not wired to see 8 billion people as kin, as fellow tribesmen. In order to be stable, a world state probably requires smaller units within the whole, something that can harness that tribal impulse in a useful way. Something in line with the Star Trek vision of a federation, all the world's peoples governing themselves as they see fit within a basic framework of human rights and other acceptable conduct, made stable by a roughly equal level of economic development and resulting prosperity. A progressive utopia in many respects, hence many on the progressive left claiming Star Trek as their own. though their enthusiasm fades a bit when I frame it as endless economic growth and ethno-cultural homelands. But that's what the Star Trek vision applied to our own world looks like, industrializing the developing world with all the environmental impact that entails, and as a byproduct, vastly reducing migration by eliminating the economic compulsion for it. As Vulcan remains Vulcan, so France remains French. And the prime directive? Right out. There's going to be some special circumstances. Just maybe the key to a stable, functional world state is a healthy bit of nationalism. There are some valid reasons why well-meaning folks might shudder at the thought of reinvigorating nationalism in any form, but at the same time try to preserve cultural diversity. And those efforts to preserve cultures within a globalizing context would be done through the lens of whatever global ruling class formed to govern the world state, a curated exercise based on world state priorities of the day. I'm reminded of the cultural cosplay in Marge Piercy's The Woman on the Edge of Time. Every village just picks the one they like and borrows its trappings. We decided to hold on to separate cultural identities, but we broke the bond between genes and culture, broke it forever. We want there to be no chance of racism again. But we don't want the melting pot where everybody ends up with thin gruel. We want diversity, for strangeness breeds richness. It's so invented, artificial. Culture reduced to the level of a team mascot. There's a similar concept at the core of Cordwainer Smith's Instrumentality of Man stories. As humanity expands across the galaxy and overcomes the inconveniences of hunger, poverty, and even death, we also lose our soul. Too much happiness, too much comfort, nothing to make life anything more than a game. Part of their solution is to reconstruct and reintroduce all the old cultural variety. I myself went into a hospital and came out French, the narrator of one of the stories tells us, as they try to bring back some variety and unpredictability to the world. Everywhere things became exciting. Everywhere men and women worked with a wild will to build a more imperfect world. I wonder if the culture suffers from a similar level of malaise.
It does. Over its 8 millennia history, entire populations have disappeared into VR games, just to escape the existential weight of reality, which does seem to be the favoured strategy for many real humans now.
While the emptiness of having solved death, want, and disease is a problem I'd very much like to struggle with, the loss of cultural depth and distinctiveness and the
voluntarily, Chef, like made the choice, made the active choice.
Erosion of meaning beyond the material is very much an issue today.
They do know
because
how
a culture
to protest.
isn't just a piece of clothing and some signature cuisine. It's a way of experiencing life, of understanding the world, and of interacting with each other.
Whenever the French protest, I wait for the fires to start, right? Like, once I see the fires, that's when I know they've gotten serious. Prior to that, they're just, like, casually protesting, but then once there's fires, okay, the French are serious now. We're one step away from the fucking barricades coming back.
State-subsidized cultural diversity is just another shallow distraction. Bread and circuses, or non and carnivals, as the case may be. Is there a way of coming together without becoming the same? Without paternalistic development assistance that looks a lot like colonialism, and without having to rely too heavily on brute force? Something less like Star Trek or even The Culture, and more like the Great Ring of Civilizations in Yefremov's The Bull's Hour. The Great Ring is a loose affiliation of worlds that exchange information with each other, and they have one rule: no censorship of information to its people. All sapient beings have a right to know the truth and reach their own conclusions. Member states that don't follow this face consequences. When in the Great Ring a state is discovered that blocks the way to knowledge for its people, such a state is dismantled. This is the only case that gives the right to interfere in the affairs of another planet. Unsurprisingly, this story was censored in the Soviet Union. Which raises another point. Science fiction as political commentary and criticism can be very effective, but it's also reflective of the specific society that produced it. Reading sci-fi from the English-speaking world, we get a lot of critiques of colonialism, of capitalism, of the problems we see around us and experience. But these aren't the only problems. If we look at science fiction written in the communist bloc, we see a much greater focus on problems of centralized control and institutional corruption. Tales of the Troika from the Strugatsky brothers, Zamyatin's We. And while not really science fiction, we can't omit Bulgakov's Master and Margarita and its scathing satire of Soviet bureaucracy, all of which faced censorship to varying degrees, while state-approved, ideologically compliant stories were elevated. A world state can't focus on solving only one set of problems as defined by one perspective, fixating on the problems of one culture while ignoring the hard-won lessons of another. To avoid having the pendulum swing between different tyrannies, we need a balanced approach and probably a fairly light touch. Some basic core values upholding human rights and dignity with a lot of room for local flavor. Of course, even a set of world values would involve the application of some level of force. Those basic concepts of human rights have to be decided on and enforced where they are found lacking. Such would be open to interpretation. In the end, we'd probably have to fight it out anyway. One culture's special circumstance is just an unprovoked attack on the recipient. That need for war is a catalyst again.
That Master and Margarita, because I like movies like that. And Master and Margarita is not available for streaming, like at all. The fuck.
And yet, we already have a world state of sorts. It's just kind of shit. An Orwellian tripod of major powers and their spheres of.
However, it does appear to be available on Daily Motion. Because the internet never fails.
Influence, exploiting the world for fun and profit, often fighting through proxies, but with a tacit understanding that cleansing the world in nuclear fire would upset the comfortable status quo. But it's even more complicated than the Orwell comparison implies. Oceania relies heavily on East Asian labor, just as East Asia needs Oceania's markets. Eurasia provides the fuel that keeps the wheels of East Asia's industry spinning, all intertwining in one global capitalist machine. Nation-states and megacorporations all do their part, organs in the greater beast. And if the corporations can't bring you in line by selling you something, the state can give you terms of service you can't refuse. Which I think brings us spiraling in toward the real hitch here. This isn't something that can be solved with legal structures. There's no perfectly worded charter, no checks and balances, no formula for optimal representation that can prevent corruption, abuse of power, and mission creep from a narrowly empowered world state to a suffocating world bureaucracy or exploitive world oligarchy over enough time. Whether conceived as a confederation or an empire, a world state run maliciously could end up being a greater danger than any of those it might help us avert. It is likely to be well administered for a course of years and can only end in despotism, as Ben Franklin said of another young federation. So far, federations, republics, liberal ideas of governance are the least bad option we have, and our stories of hopeful futures often reflect that. But the institutional, organizational side is only part of it. It needs a cultural component to balance that slide toward despotism, either of the demagogue variety or just the inexorable growth of state control over public life. Star Trek, and even more so the culture, gives us an impression of the state as a facilitator of human endeavor rather than a power over people. What is the next step of that kind of story? A story of independent, industrious people cooperating for mutual advantage in an inspiring way. Because one way or another, those questions are going to be answered, either by us or for us.
Maybe we can agree that leaving the future to unconscious forces of history is the root of many of today's problems, whether it's a federal world state or anarcho-syndicalist communes. It's the actions that humanity takes that will make our future world.
On that much, we agree. Several people have asked if I'm going to try to climb that. 25 years ago, you might have been able to talk me into it. Not now.
I hope you enjoyed that little experience. I did. I did. I gotta get back to my playlist.
Being able to run a powerful...
Shush. Okay. So yesterday we talked about the 95% failure rate paper from MIT. And actually last night, talking with some friends, I had a similar conversation talking about the flaws and everything else. And so watching that video was super helpful. One of the things that we talked about during that was how people are going to misinterpret the paper. So let's watch some people misinterpret the paper.
So with the AI bubble about to burst and everything, I have a theory as to how it
Presented without evidence.
got this bad. Why it's getting billions of dollars poured into it from the government and from all the billionaires, even though nobody asked for it, and it's cooking the planet.
Nobody asked for it.
Here's why. It's because rich and powerful men are stupid and easily flattered. GPT-4o was criticized for glazing its users, never answering a question before telling us how we're such special and unique boys for having such insightful questions. Meanwhile, they fixed it, and now GPT-5 is getting criticized for not doing that. When it came out, people were so mad that it wasn't nice anymore that they had to revert it back. But I think that's secretly the point of these things this whole time. Like, sure, okay, ChatGPT is useful for some things, and it's quicker than taking a long slog through Google to find a certain thing, except for all the times when it's lying to you. Think about why these rich assholes keep human assistants around. It's not enough for their assistants to make their appointments and reply to their emails and shit. The point is to have someone to suck up to them constantly. These AI billionaires have delusions that their chatbots are going to become AGI, hyper-intelligent God Emperor Daddy that will solve climate change no problem if we just feed it one more small town's worth of water. That's a delusion, and what do AI chatbots do with delusions? That's right. They agree with them. So I say again, the AI bubble exists because rich and powerful people are morons with huge egos. I hope this explains it. So with the AI bubble about to burst and everything,
That was definitely a position you can take. I'm not, there's nothing to respond to. It was just a gish gallop and like aligning points that don't actually exist. No, chef. No, chef. No. Let's not use our brains. Let's not interpret that the world contains a varied group of people, and those varied groups of people are all using and developing AI in their own right, because that undermines, what basically comes down to a kind of liberal racism that people do in order to underlie their points. Cool. How about this one?
Hello, I'm David Gerard, and welcome to Pivot to AI, coming to you daily. Today, AI is 95% useless, and the other 5% is spam. There's a new paper from MIT's Project Nanda called The Gen AI Divide, State of AI in Business, 2025. This got a write-up in Fortune about how 95% of generative AI projects in business just fail. The report actually came out in July, but nobody else noticed until now. Now, I've read this report, and it's odious.
Funny that.
And stupid. But the Fortune headline about 95% failure is getting a ton of attention. So, who are these guys? Nanda is a project to build AI agents, networked agents, and decentralized architecture. The word decentralized here does mean cryptocurrency. You can see the Web3 stuff on their YouTube, because AI hype and crypto hype are still the same thing. YouTube viewers can...
They are not the same thing.
and see a picture from Project Nanda's GitHub, complete with a red wavy spelling error line. They just left that in the image. I trust this image makes everything about Nanda completely clear. People have had trouble getting hold of the Nanda report, but we managed to track down the actual document. So, Nanda...
Yes, irony and sarcasm is lost on these people, Chef. They like... You just say a bunch of words in a row. It's super easy to grift people. Yeah.
Surveyed 300 public AI initiatives from January to June 2025. They spoke to 153 senior leaders, the executives who bought this stuff, and interviewed some of the poor suckers who actually had to use the chatbots in their jobs.
52 of them.
This report tries to be super positive, and it's a catalogue of failure. Quote, despite $30 to $40 billion in enterprise investment into Gen AI, this report uncovers a surprising result in that 95% of organizations are getting zero return. Just 5% of integrated AI pilots are extracting millions in value.
Why?
Unquote. Now, that's an interesting claim. What is that 5%? We'll get to that shortly. This report claims ChatGPT and Copilot enhance personal productivity, though the report doesn't bother backing that up. But buying in a Gen AI system doesn't work. Quote, enterprise-grade systems, custom or vendor sold, are being quietly rejected. Just 5% reach production. Unquote.
Why?
So, why do enterprise AI systems fail?
Why?
Quote, it is learning. Most Gen AI systems do not retain feedback, adapt to context, or improve over time. Unquote. Nanda, though, claims that a
it's an implementation issue. This guy should watch the fucking AI Daily Brief we watched yesterday.
AI, or the version they're selling, will definitely learn real good without training, completely afresh, which, of all the claims I've ever heard about agentic AI, is actually a new one on me. So how do these systems fail, since everyone told Nanda they love their chatbots?
England, you need to answer for this crime, this individual. This individual is a crime.
Quote, enterprise users reported consistently positive experiences with consumer-grade tools like ChatGPT and Copilot. Yet, the same users were overwhelmingly skeptical of custom or vendor-pitched AI tools, describing them as brittle, over-engineered, or misaligned with actual workflows.
So the issue is not the underlying tool itself, but the implementation of the tool that didn't reflect the actual need of the individuals who are going to be using it, which is a common feature of capitalism, right? Where you don't involve the workers actually on the line doing the work and decisions made by the corporate bosses, you get decreased output and you get people resistant to use the tools they're presented with.
Unquote. So what you're saying is, people like chatbots for stuff they don't know about, but the same chatbot...
No, that's not what they're saying. And now you're lying to people.
...in a different packaging are just unreliable for stuff that people do understand. Wow. Page 9 has a diagram of how AI investment is distributed across a business. Most of it goes to sales and marketing, and they spend the money on spam. Spamming people. Quote, AI-generated outbound emails. Spam. Smart lead scoring. Rolling dice to see who to spam. There's also the important work of getting the chatbot to...
Okay, now I know that you have no idea what you're talking about. That's not, like, again, yes, spam, Yes, AI generated outbound emails, all outbound all outbound media emails from corporations are fundamentally spam, right? They're just, it's the new version of the mailer you used to get in the mail. But smart lead scoring actually can use varied details across the demographic to determine who is your best likely customer. So, though I'm not a fan of all this bullshit, I can at least understand it enough and not just, gish gallop and grift from one point to another. Twitch is confused. There's an ad looping while you're talking. Sweet. Is that good or bad, or I'm not sure what's happening?
Just make stuff up. AI-based competitor analysis. This doesn't analyze anything. It makes up some words.
How do you know if you don't know what tools they're using? Because can you do analysis in the world? Yes. Can you do competitor analysis in the world? Yes, right? And the quality of that competitor analysis will depend on the amount of data points you have and the robustness of the data that you have in order to put into your analysis. Now, if we add on top of that an AI tool, somehow, as if by magic, this dipshit, this absolute numpty, I believe I'm using that word correctly, this absolute fucking bell end, it just thinks that all of a sudden you can't do that anymore.
Shaped like an analysis. Social sentiment analysis. We've mentioned before on Pivot how sentiment analysis is just completely fraudulent snake oil, but this time they're asking a chatbot to make up nonsense for them. But what are the big back office wins for AI? Quote, BPO elimination, $2 to $10 million annually in customer service and document processing. Agency spend reduction, 30% decrease in external creative and content costs. Risk checks for financial services, $1 million saved annually on outsourced risk management, unquote.
Okay.
So that's replacing customer service with chatbots, replacing creatives with AI slop for text and images.
Yes.
And ruining customers' credit ratings by changing risk management for a random text generator.
Source? You can just say that, but you have to present evidence in order for other people to be able to verify, what they're talking about or what you're talking about, right? Like, yeah, and you're not. You're quoting the article or the paper somewhat out of context, but whatever, and then just saying that the conclusion is what you believe it is. You are the low rent Ed Zitron. Timu Ed Zitron. Perfect pause face for my berating of you.
This also let the companies fire 5 to 20% of people in those functions.
Yes.
By replacing them with a nonsense machine.
Okay.
The 5% of successful AI projects are spam or cutting off body parts to save weight. Now, I do admit you can save a ton of money by ripping out your company's bodily organs and you just stop doing jobs properly at all. This works in the short term. Anyway, Nanda's solution to all of this is that you should buy their particular agentic AI. It runs on Web3, Then you can replace all your employees who do actual things with a straight-up spam bot on a blockchain. Hooray! Not sure if Nanda has a crypto token or NFTs yet, or maybe a metaverse, but I have full faith.
There's nothing to respond to here because I don't know enough about what Nanda does in their Web3 and whatever the fuck else. And this guy is just mostly full of shit and just says whatever fucking words want to come out his face hole.
Faith, that's on the way soon. Web3 is the future. Thanks for tuning in to Pivot to AI.
Yeah.
If any,
you're not welcome. All right, let's try to get in one more until we'll go fast. Is AI mania going to mean history repeating itself? Is the AI bubble bursting? Richard J. Murphy.
We are living in an AI stock bubble. I've been saying this for a while. I admit I've made videos on the subject before. Again, I confess to that. But now I'm not.
Again, England, answer for your crimes. Why are you letting these people out on the internet to peddle their bullshit and grift the rest of the world? What is wrong with you?
Not alone in saying this. The New York Times is running articles saying that they fear we are living in an era before a crash, and so is the Financial Times. The world is aligning with me. I'm no longer trying to make it do so. It has happened.
I'm going to throw their tea in the harbor right now.
And my fear is that we are, in effect, going to face the dot-com crash that hit the world in the beginning of 2000 all over.
Like, Damien seems to be a perfectly good fucking English person, talking about cricket and fucking shit and doing it in a way that makes sense and presenting you with rational arguments. And then you've got the numpty squad.
Again. And I lived through that and knew what it was all about, partly because I was involved in dot-com companies in the 1990s. And this, therefore, as far as I'm concerned, is something that is about lived experience. The S&P 500 crashed then, and so did the FTSE 100. And now things are much worse in underlying terms than they were in 2000 because the tech giants are now much more dominant in terms of stock market valuation, particularly in the USA, than they were back then. So the risk is that we could have another crash on the scale of 2000 or worse. In December 1999, just before the millennium.
FTSE, Financial Times Stock Exchange, if I recall correctly. Yeah, and they call it the FTSE.
There was a stock market peak in the UK when the FTSE 100 hit 6,930 points, an unprecedented level before then, after which it plunged by nearly 50% by 2003. It took 5 years after that to recover, before 2008 dragged it down again. If we look at the States, the S&P 500 peaked at 1,553 points in March 2000, and by October 2002 had lost near enough 50% of its value. Again, the recovery took years, until 2008.
What's up with this axis here, bro? See, on the bottom axis, we divide up the things in equal parts, right? But on this one, the distance between 300 and 400 is equal to the distance between 900 and almost 700. So what are you doing? What's happening?
When, of course, in effect, it all happened once more. The lesson is this: markets can be irrational, and the fact is that right now, markets
are irrational. Markets are absolutely irrational because no one wants to be left holding the bag. We did this yesterday, right? It's the shoals of fish who, like, they see a predator and a couple of fish move, and then the entire fucking school of fish moves in order to, like, the first few fish know why they're moving. The rest of the fish are moving because the other fish are moving.
are deeply irrational. After 2000, following the dot-com crash, investor and pension plan pain was severe and prolonged. And it's a fact that crash...
And what is this? Like, the bottom are years, and then the other axis is something that goes up to 5,000.
Was severe and prolonged. And it's a fact that crashes hurt whole economies and not just speculators. Now, I want to stress that the links aren't absolute, and in some ways they are less defined than they were earlier this century because there are so many fewer links between companies and their pension fund these days. But the truth is that unless governments act, the crisis of confidence that a stock market crash represents does drag down the economy as a whole.
I will take a look at that after stream. I'm trying to get through as much of this nonsense as possible before 12.
And so what I'm talking about is significant because if markets fall, we're going to be in deep trouble. Just look at this chart. What it shows is the price to book ratio of the value of the S&P 500 as a whole at present and compares that with the entire trajectory of this century. Right now, the price to book ratio, which is an indication of the difference between the price that people are willing to pay for shares and the underlying asset values associated with those shares, is 5.3. In other words, people are paying 5.3 times the underlying asset value of the shares that they are buying. And the last time we saw a ratio like that was in 2000, when it was 5.1. And look at what has happened in between. It fell heavily. The indication as a consequence.
It did. For almost like the entire time. It felt almost nothing, right? Like, okay, 1 point, I guess, in 2008, which was another bubble. Almost. I don't know. I'm not like, this guy likes graphs. Yes.
Between. It fell heavily. The indication as a consequence that we are seeing a bubble is incredibly strong.
No, it isn't.
AI is in effect the new .com in earnings terms. People are claiming that AI is going to deliver massive profits, and those are being valued so that stock market valuations compared to underlying asset values are enormous. The fact is, investor psychology is driving valuations, and fundamentals are not. That is the classic driving force of a bubble. And this time it's even worse.
Okay, so if we're going to talk fundamentals, then why don't we talk about long-term investments in infrastructure, which are one of the highest drivers of expenses as it comes to the AI systems, is we currently do not have an adequate amount of infrastructure in order to support the tools that we already have. If we're going to talk fundamentals.
Than it was in 2000. Because back then, the companies that were overvalued were diversified in their nature, and now they're very concentrated. Now we're looking at about 7 companies dominating the US stock markets in particular and dragging the rest of the world behind them in terms.
I mean, energy is another aspect of the infrastructure, right? Like, but you have the data centers, you have the GPUs themselves, you have the energy infrastructure, you have the transmission lines, you have all of that coming together, and it just hasn't been invested in. We spent the last, I don't know, there was a thing, again, I can't remember exactly when it happened, but we had a big power outage decades ago, and it was related to the Ohio section of the national grid. And at that point in time, we were talking about how we hadn't adequately updated our electrical infrastructure. And here we are in 2025, and we still haven't done that. And we didn't get to the end of this guy's video, but it's probably just as compelling as the rest of it. So if you want to follow up with that, there's the rest of it. Let me go ahead and do the thing. Let's do the thing. I appreciate everybody. Again, the schedule has been updated. So if you want to know the next time I will be live, look at the schedule. The schedule will tell you the next time I will be live. It is noon, and James is not here. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope it was entertaining and elucidating and fun and other words that are positive that make you want to come back the next time. And tell all your friends and tell your favorite streamer and, you know, such. Come on, dude. Is he not streaming today? Did I miss something? No, that shapes moving interpretation thing was awesome. Nope. No announcement. Oop. There he is. Thank you. Timing. I appreciate you all. Enjoy the rest of your day, which is already in progress. Have fun over at James's. And in the meantime, drink your water, eat some food, take your meds if you forgot, and always remember that Chuggy loves you. And so do I. Be great.